good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Jason Buffington with Veeam, and welcome to our new Industry Insights on Tuesdays instead of Mondays. We're actually moving the show that Dave and I usually do on Mondays to Tuesday because too many Monday holidays, dang it. We keep missing y'all. So now we're going to go to Tuesdays instead. As always, I hail from the great state of Texas in the United States. And so let's go ahead and bring up the map for a second. If you look over on that left-hand side, I'm in Texas. Our producer is in Georgia. We don't typically get California green lit so early in the call, and yet today is a profound pleasure. I want to introduce Alison Connor to the show. But now, Alison, you're from California. I forgot to plug, though, social is coming out of Romania, and please tell us where you're from today. So in the chat, let us know where you're from. And while your hands are on the keyboard, we're going to be taking you through some new data. Alison, I have to say, when I first found out that you were joining Veeam, I was so excited. So let me make sure I get this right. So you've built your own web architectures that other folks have used. You've launched apps on the Salesforce App Exchange. You've run marketing for organizations. So you've been a power user and a beneficiary of Salesforce. And now you're here to actually help steer Veeam's conversation and our capability set as it relates to Salesforce. So welcome to Veeam and welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. Everything you said was true. I've actually worked with startups as well as high-profile organizations, including software as a service, platform as a service, and fintech. But I've always touched Salesforce in some capacity, so it's sort of all come around to this moment.
Fantastic. All right, so we've got two opinions. So you've got a backup person on the left, and you've got a Salesforce-y person on the right. And so what we did in this research project was we went off and found 800 other folks that are on one side or the other of that aisle. We want to introduce you to a new research project that just published yesterday-ish. Within the last couple of days, called the Salesforce Protection Trends Report. And you can type in the friendly URL on the bottom, vee.em/SF22. You can hit that QR code in the lower left-hand corner. But here's the thing that I would encourage you to look at when you download this. Most of the folks that are on this live stream are predominantly backup folks, right? Because that's the Veeam audience overall. One of the key designs of this particular project was to understand what do the other personas that are involved, like all the Alisons of the world, what do they think about protecting Salesforce data? So you can see on that right-hand side, there's a range of 25% of IT operations generalists, 25% backup admins, those are my people. All right, and then on that left-hand side, we see Salesforce leaders or teams. We see Salesforce admins, Salesforce developers, Salesforce consultants. Alison, when we started framing out this research several months ago, you were the first one to introduce the idea that Salesforce admins don't typically look like the traditional IT pro. They don't come from that traditional IT pedigree, and there's not usually one job description. Can you help us understand the diversity of what we're seeing on that left-hand side of the persona chart?
Absolutely. So they have their own set of personas. So a Salesforce admin can become an admin in a few different ways. Maybe they worked within a Salesforce org and wanted to take it to the next level because they had become something called an accidental admin. That's when there's no one really in your organization running it and you need to step up. Been there, done that. And the same as a Salesforce developer, you might have started your career as a developer and, sort of veered in a different direction. But all those personas on the left are very, very specific to Salesforce. So there sometimes can be a sort of back and forth of what an IT or a backup admin, how they see the ecosystem and how the Salesforce admin or developer sees it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get straight into the data. So one of the things we're going to try to do is we're going to spend about 20 to 22 minutes or so looking at some of the initial results of the industry report. We hope that you download the report. As always, what Veeam does is we go out to independent third-party research firms. We give them a list of questions or topics that we'd like to get some better answers on, right? So Veeam does this in order to understand where's the market going? What do customers want? Right, to make sure that we're delivering those kinds of products in advance. And so let's get into some of those questions now. traditionally, whenever I have in the past, so I've been in backup for 32 years. It's the
Mhm.
only thing I've ever done since getting out of school. And for as long as I've been in backup, when I work with application owners, we're going to generalize Salesforce that way. When I work with application owners, typically the app owner really only thinks about, I got to get it back to yesterday in case I screw it up, right? As opposed to I need 5 years and 10 years of retention and those kinds of things. So one of the first questions we wanted to ask is, do folks agree and are they aligned on what are the reasons why organizations need to back up or want to back up Salesforce? As usual, the long lines to the right means they could choose all that apply. The little shorter light green lines are they had to choose just one. What's that primary reason overall? But I'm going to draw folks to Allison. This always worries me a little bit. That orange line on the very bottom of the screen, 19%, 1 in 5 organizations say, hey, Salesforce backs up my stuff for me. I don't have to. Could you tell me whether that's true or not?
That's sort of true. So Salesforce does back up your data, but not your metadata, which is just as important as your data in your structure, 100%. So what the difference is Salesforce does back it up, but then, every week we'll send you, a zip file full of Excel spreadsheets. And so if you have something go down, you lose 100, 200, 300 contacts, and you want to put that back together, you're manually taking that apart, putting it back together one by one. So if you think about that and what the kind of time and energy would take to make that happen, it would be a bad couple of days for sure.
Okay, so I hear some of those same meta words that we often hear for things like I worked with Oracle DBAs and they said the same kind of thing. I've worked with M365 admins and they say the same kind of thing. It's like, okay, so there's the raw data itself and then there's all the complexity of what happens afterwards. And that's probably going to lean us right into the top of this chart, right? So when we ask organizations, it's a three-way tie for most common. But when you look at most important reason, the most important reason that the folks are citing is the admin, there was a problem during an import, right? So it wasn't even about, reconstructing. It was about, hey, I tried to put some new stuff in and it didn't work right. Right. And then, so, I mean, talk about how often is data ingested into these kinds of platforms?
I think it can happen every day with the
Every day.
larger
Okay.
organizations. Yeah, absolutely. Because so if you use Data Loader, which is a tool, Salesforce tool, you might have, let's say 1,000 contacts that you want to upload into a certain place, and say by accident you upload that into the wrong field. So
All right.
suddenly an entire group of field marketers was expecting these. They don't have them, but then this other group on the other side of the country has all these. And so to try to undo that and then put it all back together, it's another bad day at work.
Got it. All right. So let's talk about other bad days at work for a second, just to kind of finish out this slide. So I get that as an app owner, the most important thing you're thinking about is that app specific behavior of an admin is going to pull that stuff in. I will tell you as a longtime backup professional, I love the idea that number two, right behind that, is just the recognition that it's corporate data and corporate data has to get backed up. Right. And ideally, you ought to be thinking about doing the same kinds of processes and methodologies that you back up the rest of your environment with. So I love that number two is just, you got to back it up, because candidly, if I was talking to Oracle DBAs, that one shows up a lot lower in the list. Third in the line, I like regulatory compliance, right? So if I have a corporate mandate that says 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, I like the fact that that folks are keeping it that long. And certainly in 2022, almost 2023, you can't have an IT conversation without talking about ransomware. There's a lot of other reasons. They're, frankly, all over the map as far as what the rationales for this are. But speaking of the map, some of y'all have already been piling on. So let's find out where folks are from. First and foremost, got to say, love it when the Canadians chime in. Turns a big old chunk of this map green. So top of the morning to you. Good morning for that. And if we look down the line, let's see, we got Ohio's in the house. Very nice. Illinois. I spent some time in Chicago. That's cool. My neighbors to the south, Actually yours too, I guess. Our Mexico is also well represented. We were joking beforehand that Texas education really only teaches me about things around Texas, California the same way,
Same.
and yet we share a lovely neighbor immediately to our south. Let's see if we go back to the old country. We got Romania represented. Remember, Social's out of there as well, and some of hopefully her friends. Germany's in the house. Ukraine is in the house. Prayers continue to go up for y'all. We got Argentina going on. One of my favorites. South Africa's in the house. Everything's always better when South Africa's online. Just they do food. They do food so well there. Let's see. United Arab Emirates is in town. India's in the house as well. So awesome. Yeah, look at that. We've got some good chunks of the world turning green. So thank you so very much on that. We will check back in a little bit, but please keep telling us where you're from. And also, if you have questions about the research, if you have questions about Veeam's approach to Salesforce, little spoiler alert, by the way, the research report on Salesforce came out the same day that our product did. Right. So we actually do have a new backup product for Salesforce. It's the other reason why we do this research is to make sure that it's aligned with actually the capabilities that are there. So let's look back at those capabilities again. So we talked earlier about, generality around why you back up. That's the optimist version. Let's talk about the pessimist version. If we can bring the slides back up again, we did ask the basic question, why, which of the following is of concern to you around that? And again, as always, long lines point to the right, choose all that apply. Short lines is what's the most important or primary concern. Alison, I'm going to give this to you two ways because I think there's two different ways to cut this. When we cut it by what's the most common response, that's those long lines to the right, humans. Humans are bad. Right? Developer humans are bad. Users are bad. Humans are bad. We talked about bad imports, but talk about when we say human error in users, what does that really look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So human error can happen. Users have different levels of permissions in Salesforce. So what can happen a lot of the time is maybe Salesforce is brought into an organization. It's a smaller maybe organization, and they give 5 people admin access, right? Like, okay, this is great. You guys got to help out while we get this moving, get it integrated. So then the business grows, they sort of forget who has admin access, and suddenly, the head of marketing or one of the sales reps who still has access doesn't like a field, decides to change it, it trickles down, things are erased. So there's all sorts of issues like that, and you're running around thinking, who has admin access? What is happening? Yeah, so that happens more than we would like, for sure.
Okay. All right. There's just so many scenarios. It's like, okay, now I kind of want to log into Veeam's Salesforce implementation and see if maybe I have more rights than I think.
Right, and what you could do.
Somebody.
Right.
Go into that competitor field and just say bad guys, and just rename the field. I think would be fun.
Right.
All right, so this is when it's most common, though. But when we look at, typically when we think about buying drivers, it's really around, what is most concerning to the business? What is most concerning to the organization overall? And we do see something a little bit different here. It turns out more around corruption, around the qualitative aspect. In fact, you could even argue that, human error Salesforce staff, I'm not throwing them under the bus, but those top 3 really look like they're all around the qualitative confidence in the data, right? So you got accidental corruption, you have malicious corruption. Hey, someone at SFDC broke something. I mean, just qualitative concern over the value of the data or the validity of the data. I would have never thought about that before.
Absolutely. So, data corruption can, in a accidental way, data corruption could happen where, a Salesforce admin would move a large amount of data, try to consolidate data, things like that. Maybe they aren't really checking in the sandbox and pushing to production without, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But then also, it can fall into the data corruption, which is, a little malicious. Unfortunately, if, possibly a sales rep is leaving in 2 weeks, they want to take their contacts with them. And, that can happen that they take their contacts, maybe they take one field and change a few numbers everywhere and they're gone. I mean, it's not great, but it happens.
Wow. that is the power of truly having a shared asset like that. Is
Right.
anybody can go back and do something silly. Back when I
Right.
first started getting in backup, the worst that I had to worry about was, a team that I was using the same shared folder, and somebody
Right.
overwrote last month's budget spreadsheet
Right.
with this month's budget, and then you wonder why the other one isn't there anymore. In a shared database architecture, that is exponentially uber worse.
Yes.
That's the technical term for that.
Right. Right. Right.
Okay, so we've got the drivers out of the way. We understand some of the points as far as the why. Let's take a look at the who. By the way, all of this and more, all the charts that you're seeing here, they're all part of that Salesforce research. Again, that is VEE.am/SF22, or hit the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And I do see we've got a couple folks are still piling in, so we're going to check the map in just a minute. If you have not weighed in yet, we'd love to hear about where you are from that perspective. But now that we understand the why, let's talk into that who again. Now, we've got one question here. We actually cut it two different ways. On the left, you see the aggregate. So 714 folks said, who's actually clicking the mouse, who's doing the backup of Salesforce data. And it's roughly 2-to-1, 59, or let's call it 60% say the backup team is doing it. 30% say the Salesforce admin's doing it. And that's pretty common these days. I'll explain more about that in just a second. I'm honestly more concerned around the 8% that say Salesforce is resilient and therefore not necessary, and then the 3% that say they don't back up. One of the things we've often heard, especially with as a service, right? We see it in PaaS, we see it in M365. No surprise here. A lot of organizations confuse the fact that just because the service is still running, that your users are productive and that previous versions aren't necessary anymore, right? And so we've talked about some of those reasons why. So those 8%, let's just be clear, they're wrong, right? You do still got to back that stuff up. But the other 2-to-1 mix, we actually see that as well in M365, IaaS, and PaaS as well. But let's take a look, Alison, on the right-hand side, because in the lime green, we have your peeps, right? The Salesforce org.
Right.
Right, we got the darkest green; those are the backup people. Those are my people, and then the IT operations. That middle child stuck in between, right? But I actually am intrigued by the fact that there's really good alignment. Everybody seems to understand the same kind of thing. That more often than not, it is the backup admin team responsible for backing up the same ones who back up the rest of the environment, backing up Salesforce too. Does that surprise you at all?
It does surprise me a little bit because I think I have seen in the past that there can be some confusion. There can be some confusion in the way that the backup admins, yes, they are saying, yes, we're backing it up. But I think they tend to look to the Salesforce admins to say, or as admin, a consultant, whatever the case might be, like, this is sort of yours. Let me know that it's happening. And I think sometimes the Salesforce admin should be like, I think the backup admin has that. So there can be confusion on who's in charge until something goes down, and then it turns into, are you in charge? No, I thought you were in charge. No, who's in charge?
I have scars, bruises, and many lost 3-day weekends from that particular experience. I have never ever in my entire career met an application owner who said, when I grow up, I want to be a backup admin, right? I mean, that just doesn't happen, right? And so the idea that and now I will also point out though, one of our friends who typically runs our M365 scenarios, Corinne Bissett, she will often point out when the backup admins are in charge versus the app owners, that actually means the backups are being done. Because the app owner tends to have so many other things that they really want to focus on besides that. But I like the fact that overall, regardless of which side of the aisle that you're on, those are aligned. Let's go back and look at the sides of the aisle. Let's look back at the map a little bit. We've got some good representation. If we go to the New World first, let's see, it looks like Tennessee is in the house. We got New Hampshire. Some more Texans piled on. I saw a few of my people kind of pile in. Florida is in the house. By the way, I'm an Aggie, so Florida, I will see you on Saturday afternoon down at Kyle Field. Let's see, Ohio is in. Let's go take a look at the east, at the old world again. We've got Nigeria. All right, haven't seen them in a while. And Israel, I think. Yep. Very cool. Hey, speaking of going around the world, do want to give a plug out for Veeam on Update. So all the countries that are represented here and the other 140 some odd around the world, we've got an event coming up on Thursday of this week, November 3rd, called Veeam on Update. It's visible in the Americas and me on the 3rd. In the APJ, it's in the 4th. But go click on that link there, veeam.com/veeamon. And you'll see that Veeamon-update link. We're going to be giving you an update. It's been roughly 6 months since Veeamon, and it'll be 6 more months until the next Veeamon. And so we have this half-annual check-in on what's coming new in products. There's actually even more research coming out, and a couple of surprises that I'm not allowed to spoil for folks. So be sure to register for the Veeam event on Thursday. Got a lot of great content planned, including some prizes and stuff that you saw on that right-hand side. All right. So we've looked through the why. We've looked at the who. We got just one or two more things I kind of want to point out to folks. So,
Sure.
Alison, you've talked a lot about, that import scenario, that bad data scenario along the way. And so we have two questions around that I think kind of highlight this for folks. The first one is the question was asked if there was a bad import or corruption, something that you said happens, daily in many organizations, how confident that you could restore the real data, that's in air quotes, right?
Right.
And its dependencies. And you mentioned earlier how the complexity isn't always just the data itself, but everything else. Now, first and foremost, I don't think I've ever seen a pie chart that had this level of confidence in any backup scenario. So I'm a little concerned they're a little overly confident on that
Yes.
left-hand side. But actually, what I really want you to speak to is take a look on the right-hand side. Same question. We just cut it by those three personas. And the Salesforce admins and IT operations, they seem to mostly agree, right, on that right-hand side. But it's a little concerning to me that the backup admins, they think it's even easier than the other two groups do. And typically what that means is the backup admins they don't understand how hard it really is. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you and this chart. So, right, so it goes back to what I mentioned a little bit earlier is Salesforce is very complex, and it's, as I describe it all the time, it's just a different animal. So you really have to understand the way all the different pieces, all the context in the account, and a lead layout and the different pieces and everything about that. And I think that in that scenario, who's in charge? The backup admin thinks, yeah, oh, our Salesforce admin, sure, this is not so hard. We got this. And maybe a Salesforce professional might say, I'm pretty sure we have this. but I'd sleep better at night if I was really sure that we had this.
All right, we're going to highlight this problem one more time. And again, the main reason for this is just thinking through, the folks who are watching this call, you are the folks most mindful of backup, right? Most mindful of data protection, the imperatives like compliance and regulations, the importance of preventing against cyber, the importance of retaining data over time, as opposed to your constituents, those Salesforce folks, they're thinking about things like corruption and import. It really does take a village for that. What I hope comes out of today's session is that you'll download the research and maybe walk it down the hall to some of those Salesforce peeps and say, hey, could we have a conversation? Because statistically speaking, I probably don't know the gravity that I should. Right? I think that would be an interesting conversation to have. And let me put a fine point on that. 100 Salesforce accounts. Now this again, this could be, the sales guy that leaves on a bad day. This could be a bad import. Lots of reasons why 100 accounts somehow just kind of fall off the back of the truck. Right. And so the question that was asked of the 800 organizations was, how long would it take to get back up and running again? And you can see only 43%, less than half of the organizations said they could do it within a day. Right, same business day, 8 hours. You could add another 26%, excuse me, that said at least within one whole day, 24 hours, because I don't really need sleep. I'm happy to do that after hours. Average on this was 39 hours though, and that's scary on itself. But what I want to point out is take a look on that right-hand side, right? Average response was 39 hours, and that is 44 hours if you're the Salesforce admin. 42 hours, that's about the same for IT operations. And again, backup admins think, I can do it better. They can do it at 27. Again, it seems like we're having that same kind of underestimating the complexity again, Allison.
100%. When I look at those numbers, and I mean, the first issue, of course, is what the Salesforce admin thinks compared to what the backup admin thinks.
Yeah.
The Salesforce admin is in it. He's in it she also is in it all day, every day. And they are saying, hold on, no, this is 44 hours. And even when you look at the average hours, I mean, raise your hand if you want to go to your boss and say, there's a mistake, I can fix it, and it's just going to take me 39 hours. Is that okay? No, that is a conversation no one wants to have.
Yeah, my friend Rin, she calls that a resume generating event.
Right.
So yeah,
I say update your LinkedIn profile when things like that happens. Yeah.
All right, so you got about 4 minutes left, and I promised you a little bit of time to talk about the product itself. Let's walk through these last elements.
Absolutely. So we are so excited to launch Veeam Backup for Salesforce. So it eliminates the risk of losing your Salesforce data and metadata due to all the reasons we talked about: human error, integration issues, as well as different Salesforce data loss scenarios. We are different that we deploy on premises or in the cloud. You choose where you want to deploy, and you back up your data that's best for your business.
Love that.
So yeah, powered by Salesforce APIs, and you back up and restore the data and metadata. And we touched on metadata a little bit, but anyone who is in Salesforce understands the metadata is just as important as the data.
Got it. All right. So we've had some news. So let's summarize what's available now as far as product functionality, and then we'll give a few last steps.
Absolutely. So we are available now, and we are excited. Go to veeam.com and learn more about that. We also have a community edition, which is free forever, and it's for 50 Salesforce licenses or less. So if you are a smaller company, you come on, you've installed Salesforce and you're ready to go. That's a great thing for you. Also, we always have a 30-day trial, and that is full product functionality, free for 30 days. You install it, you play with it, you learn it, you love it. It's good.
Nice. All right. So yeah, so products available now. Definitely want to encourage folks to go and consume that in whatever format makes sense. We know from some of the other research that's out there, the vast majority of organizations are going to leverage either the community edition of the product or full functioning for 30 days and really understand why is it that Veeam is different in the space. Hey, look, you spent almost 30 minutes with us today, so we want to give you a couple takeaway resources for you. The Salesforce report, all the charts that we've talked about so far, those are all available in the Salesforce Protection Trends report. That's the QR code on the left-hand side. And then, of course, that is, as always, unbiased industry research. On the right-hand side, that's the biased version, right? That's the Veeam white paper where we talk about what we do to address Salesforce backup and more important, recovery of the data and the metadata. I have learned something new earlier today. We're almost at the bottom of the hour, so take a look at these two QR codes, grab those really quick. 3, 2, 1. And then lastly, if you haven't heard about it already, we are going to talk more about Salesforce and M365 and Amazon and Azure and Google and on-prem and Kubernetes and M3, everything. So it is our 6-month check-in on from Veeam On to Veeam On. And so please, if you haven't already, register for this free event. And we're going to catch you up on all the rest of the products. Alison, has been a privilege and a delight to have you on today. And again, on behalf of Veeam, thank you for making us better. Thank you for helping us deliver a great solution for Salesforce. So with that, we'll stay on for a few more questions. Hey, I do have to give a quick shout out. It looks like Colorado, Peru, and Turkey piled on. Keep weighing in on where you're from, and frankly, we might even just reach out to you afterwards and say, hey, I'm down the road. Let's talk Veeam.
Right.
So All right. With that, thanks for watching. Be sure to tune in for our next several Tuesdays. Dave and I will be talking through even more research, but you're going to hear more about that after Veeam On Update. Thanks for watching.